Hello everyone and welcome to Mukuru Christian Church. My name is Kelvin. Some while ago before Easter, we were on Philippians. We were preaching on Philippians and Dave had done on Philippians 2. But I'm here to finish the rest of it. And let's get onto it. Paul says, "Therefore, my dear friends, as you have always obeyed, not only in my presence but now much more in my absence, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purpose." So as we had seen in Philippians 1, where Paul had written to the Philippians and told them that they should continue with the ministry without selfish ambitions, whether in his presence or in his absence. So here we see that they've done that, and that's why he tells them, as you have always obeyed, not only in my presence but now much more in my absence, continue to work out your salvation and fear with fear and trembling. And we should be really careful about what Paul is saying here, whereby as Mukuru Christian Church we talk about grace and truth every other day, of which the salvation that Paul is talking here is only by grace. And now the truth that again follows the statement about salvation by Paul is that what do we do for our salvation? How are we following up our salvation? As much as we are saved, we still have to work on it. That's what Paul really means here. It doesn't mean you have to try to earn it. Then goes ahead and says, for it is God who works in you to will and to act, in order to fulfill his good purpose. So here there's another reason again to work out on your salvation, because you're not doing it for yourself. Paul here says it is God who works in you. It's God who is already working in you. It's not you who's doing all that. And then it's all for God's purpose. And then in verse 14, Paul goes ahead and says and tells the Philippians to do everything without grumbling or arguing, so that they may become blameless and pure children of God, without fault in a warped and crooked generation. Then he tells them, then you will shine among the stars, among them like stars in the sky, as you hold firmly to the word of life. And then I will be able to boast on the day of Christ that I did not run or labor in vain, but even if I'm being poured out like a drink, offering to the sacrifice and service coming from your faith, I'm glad and rejoice with all of you. So you too should be glad and rejoice with me. So what Paul is trying to say here is, it's a piece of advice, and he's telling them that in everything they do as a ministry or as a church, they should do it without complaining and disputing, because some will be like, some are preaching there for their selfish ambitions, as we saw in Philippians 1. And so there's lots of disputes in the Philippi church, and Paul warns them against this. As much as it's an advice, it's still a warning that that's not the way it should be. Then we see him saying that so that you may become blameless and pure children of God, without fault in a warped and crooked generation. So here Paul is referring to the old generation of the Israelites who are really complaining to God about, hey, we need manna, hey, we need a king, hey, we need this and this, and then they will dispute every other time. So Paul is trying to tell the Philippians not to act like the old Israelites. And then he goes ahead in verse 17, says, but even if I'm being poured out like a drink offering on the sacrifice and service coming from you, from your faith, I'm glad and rejoice with all of you. So Paul here, by this time, he sees himself almost in martyrdom. He feels like I could be dead any other time, but he believes that even if he dies, he'll rejoice. He'll be glad that he'll rejoice with all of them, and he also wants them to do that. So he says, so you too should be glad and rejoice with me. And then from the context in Philippians 2, I had two very great lessons here. And the first one was, we are called to work out our own salvation. Yeah, like I said, you can't earn your salvation, and that's why even God sent Jesus to save us all. But you still have to follow up on your salvation and try to live righteously to back up your salvation. And this, we see this in Philippians 12 all the way to 13, where he says, therefore, my dear friends, as you have always obeyed, not only in my presence, but now much more in my absence, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. Yeah, and again, let me bring across the point of fear and trembling. We are not here, Paul is not here trying to tell you like, hey, fear God and like you fear to interact with him. No, that's not the point. Paul is trying here to say, like, just like your physical dad, where in most cases you want to tell him something, you don't fear him, but you are kind of holding it back because of you respect him, not that you fear him. So on our salvation, let's not fear God, but let's fear going the wrong way, or let's try to be on the righteous path. In verse 13, he also goes ahead and says, for it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purpose. So the salvation is not yours. It's not only because of you, it's for God's glory and for his good purpose. And also, he's the one who's working in you. And the second lesson was, let us stop complaining and disputing. We see this in Philippians 14, where it says, do everything without grumbling or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. So this, again, we see Paul is not in the best situation. He is already in a Roman prison somewhere, and he is facing his fair share of trouble, but he doesn't come out and say, hey, he doesn't complain and in the letter and tell the Philippians, hey, let's fight the Romans or whatever. He's in a very relaxed mood. Like, he tells them even to rejoice, because they are not bound to dispute and complain about everything. And that goes again, that comes to us now as a church and everyone. There's too much going around. There's the pandemic that's here, and business are locked, everything is locked up, and they are complaining. Complaining doesn't really help us, and disputing with your neighbor because of this and this doesn't really help at this time. But let's try to live together as a community and as a church. Thank you for being with me through this time. Stay home, stay safe. Until next time, be blessed. Bye.